Trying to understand the eminence of real-world assets and the DeFi world? Then you are welcome to Link to the Chain, a podcast brought to you by BSOS. It is designed to help you understand the happenings of decentralized finance along with real-world assets. I am your host, Nikki from BSOS. I will be inviting experts from the Web3 industry to share with you their experiences and ideologies on RWAs and the DeFi world. I am pleased to be joined by Dominic Niolu. He's the CEO and co-founder of Taro Finance, based out in the greater Seattle area. Dominic, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself? I know it's kind of like that typical intro question, but for anyone listening who's new to the platform, who's new to this podcast, just give us a little intro about you and kind of how you got into the DeFi world, essentially.
Yeah, sure. So I think like a lot of people in this space, I came from a traditional finance background. So right out of college, I started out in investment banking, as an analyst, and I was working on mid-market mergers and acquisitions primarily. And eventually, I realized I didn't want to sit behind a computer and compile due diligence data and make decks all day and things like that. So I started looking to get more involved in the tech side and like the operational side of working with companies. And I moved up to a Seattle based private equity venture capital firm called Intellectual Ventures, where I spent about 6 years. And during my time there, I think that was around 2017, during my time there, the first crypto wave really hit. And given the position that I was in there, I kind of did a lot of research into what blockchain is, what the potential implications are, and like what companies are using it for today. And back then, of course, it was all about cryptocurrency and ICOs, and there was kind of that whole hype cycle. But what I was really focused on is how to, connecting it back to my professional roots in like real world finance. And the first thing I thought of is how can you potentially make like the mergers and acquisitions process in a private market streamlined, right? It's a very bureaucratic process. There's a lot of like data that's needs to be verified by like 30 different people at the same time. It was really frustrating to try to do that. So that's where my first thought was, okay, what if we can use the blockchain to verify that data, and then once you do that, you can actually conduct the transaction on chain, and then all of a sudden you cut out all these middlemen. And of course, like down the line, that's what snowballed into TaroFi.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I know the landscape is it's still new, it's still upcoming. I mean, even myself, I didn't really start getting into like NFTs, crypto, Web3, blockchain until early or probably late 2020. So yeah, it's still kind of in its infancy, but it sounds like you kind of had that background already coming from the traditional finance world. So that's really cool that you were able to kind of like translate it into your own business now, right? It kind of sounds like you saw the need and now you're tackling that problem. So that's really awesome. And I used to live in Seattle actually, so
Oh, cool.
it's a great place to be for this type of tech. And yeah, it sounds like you're kind of like in the perfect spot. Um, so to begin with, like for anyone who is new to the space, in your own words, what exactly is tokenization or creating a digital security asset?
Yeah, so I guess that like they're actually two separate things. So to me, tokenization is really just representing anything on chain, pretty much as the medium of exchange on a blockchain is called a token. So it's whatever that token is tied to. So I mean, you could think of like Bitcoin as having tokenized, some economic value on their protocol, right? And same with Ethereum, and same with every other token that's out there, regardless of whether it's a cryptocurrency or not. And then when it becomes a security, it's just when that token hits like the SEC guidelines for what is a security, like expectation of profit from other people, right? And where we focus is tokenization of real world assets. So what that specifically means is a token that represents like some secured claim to, like a building or like a car or, whatever it may be. that's, I guess, that's where like the digital security asset part of it comes in. So it's just really the process of representing something on chain.
Kind of like, I think I heard the term phygital, like a physical and digital asset. Is that a thing, or is that kind of like blockchain slang?
I feel like that's probably blockchain slang. I mean, there's definitely a lot of like people coining their own terms every day.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean that's one way to put it.
Okay. So you did mention already kind of some type of assets that TaroFi tokenizes. So besides like real estate or car ownership, are there any other types of assets that you think could also be in the future a part of that category?
Yeah, I'll clarify. So TaroFi doesn't focus on cars. That was just an example because I'm pretty
Okay.
sure there's a company out there doing that. But we do like mostly like investable assets, like again, like commercial grade real estate, things like that. But again, yeah, you can really do it with anything. I think when you like maybe cars is a good example of like a really niche market you could do it in because like the average person's not going to know enough about car ownership and values and how to invest in them to make profit, right? But when you look at like real estate, which is a relatively well understood asset class, a lot of people, even if they're not um, full time financial professionals, like in the finance industry, will say, oh, okay, well, I can generate like a rental income if I buy that thing. So that's really where we focus. But in reality, like my outlook on it is like technically, if you can build the legal wrapper around the underlying asset, you can tokenize it, right? And I think what it really comes down to is what like the laws in the jurisdiction that you're operating in, because you can generate a token and tell someone that it represents a claim to this building I'm living in right now, but in the real world, if someone just doesn't give you like whatever, like doesn't hand that over or something at the end of the day, you have to take them to court and you have to go through a legal process. And if the laws don't recognize it, you're out of luck. Doesn't matter what that person told you. So I think that's really the limitation on it right now. So there's more jurisdictions coming out today and recognizing a token as actual ownership of something. But if they don't, they don't. That's it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, still kind of being in its infancy, we always have to kind of like go through the different loopholes, I guess, with, the law. So totally understandable. And then why do you think there is a need for this type of technology besides everything you've kind of already listed? Why is there a need to create digital securities of real world assets, like, for instance, the functionality? Is there anything more that you would want to tell, like, the audience, hey, this is why you need a company like TaroFi out there in the world for your investments and whatnot?
Yeah, so I think like there's certainly a lot of use cases that are like fake use cases where people want to like tack on the technology just to say they're using it and like get short-term monetary gain or something. But where we focus is specifically within private market assets, investable assets, and I think like the unique part about it is that you have like public equities, for example. There's a massive $1 trillion industry around like running an exchange like the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange that serves as a central point of access to invest in public equities and debt. When you go to a private asset, like a private company, startup, private, like a growth stage company or real estate and all these other things, that market infrastructure just doesn't exist. Like there's nothing out there at all. And if there is some level of infrastructure, it's really siloed, right? So you'll have this crowdfunding website that serves this specific like group of people and investors, and there's one over here and there's one over here, and there's no connectivity between them, right? You have to go do a bunch of stuff to get on either one of those. And then when you look at like an actual secondary market where you can go and trade that definitely does not exist traditionally, and it's all done through who essentially. So what tokenization can do is start to create the actual baseline infrastructure to have a similar type level of market infrastructure, if not greater, because it embraces technology from the very beginning than what you have in the public equities market. So for us, it comes down to accessibility and then transparency as well, right? So you can access these types of assets that maybe you couldn't before. But then you can actually verify information about them, at least at the level of, who is the last, does this person selling me this thing actually own it? Because believe it or not, that is a problem in private markets all the time. And then you can start tacking on information like, what does the income statement for last year look like for this thing I'm trying to buy? You can store that on chain alongside a token. And this company's trying to do stuff like that today. So we're serving as a place for people to access it, get access to that information in kind of like a democratized manner.
Yeah. When you were mentioning like provenance and stuff like that, it kind of made me think about people who invest in like fine art. So
Hmm.
would you say that could also be something that you guys might maybe look into trying to secure as like another like avenue besides real estate? Because that can also be up in the millions or really high numbered asset. And it is important, right, for fine art collectors who
Hmm.
want to know, is this real? Is this fake? Is it a blah, 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 blah? Who owned it last? What did they buy it for? What did they sell it for? So is fine art something that has like maybe crossed your mind, or is this the first time you're hearing about it?
No, I mean I've definitely heard about it, and I think we're as a platform, our aim is really to be asset agnostic as we grow out. So it can be anything that we think is like has a viable market going for it, and fine art is definitely one of those things.
Cool. Yeah. Really random, but I can see like that use case as well.
Yeah.
So, and moving on, how are tokenizations of real world assets helping in kind of smoothing the lending and borrowing? And also, what are the benefits it holds for future investors or current ones?
So I think again, it comes from our perspective, it comes down to accessibility, right? So I don't know anyone back when pre 2015, like maybe the best way to invest in something for like the millennial generation was like Robinhood, right? You had a pretty limited amount of stuff you can get onto, and you definitely couldn't lend or borrow. But when you look at like Centrifuge or Goldfinch Finance today, of course, there's laws that say you have to be an accredited investor to participate in most of those. If you hit that, at least you can get in and start lending and generating a return you can't find on the public market. And if those platforms didn't exist, you'd have to be pretty much a professional or have the ability to dedicate so much time to learning and like getting the network to have access to those types of deals. And you'd have to have the capital to make a fairly significant contribution to a pool that someone's lending in and out of in order to actually be able, even like for them to pick up the phone for you to say you want to invest, right? But now it like breaks down all of those barriers and it gives a reason to like a mid-sized lending, like Morgan Stanley or someone doesn't need this right now. Like they have their own infrastructure that they operate and they don't care how much money they throw at it right now. But the like smaller mid-sized lending institution in emerging market or even within the US sometimes needs access to more capital, and they can't tap into like debt markets like a really big bank or something can. So this gives like an alternative source of financing for them. You can look at it for the group that's like the lending institution in this case, or even the borrower, right? Like they're the person or the group, the profile of the group that's going to utilize the tech is someone that doesn't have access to this already, right? And if you're either an end borrower or like a mid-sized or smaller mid-sized lending institution to those borrowers, you probably don't have access to global debt markets like, again, like the Morgan Stanleys and these guys, like the bulge bracket banks of the world. So this is also accessibility for you to tap into a global source of capital in a similar manner that those guys can.
Yeah, I agree with you saying how like accessibility and transparency are definitely kind of the two core values, you could say, that I think Web3 and the blockchain technology as a whole needs to really kind of hone in on, because obviously we've seen what's happened with the last few months of like our crypto winter and the downturn and all that. And the whole thing with like FTX and
Yeah.
weren't there like a lot of layoffs recently with Kraken? So we're kind of like in that weird phase where it's like, can we trust this technology? Can people actually use this? But minus all the FUD, I know that you can also see the value of this tech, and hopefully through networking with people like you and having more podcast episodes, like educating people who are interested and who are already in the industry, can bring that accessibility and transparency. So thank you for kind of like bringing up those two things, as I think they are super important. Another question for you is like, what is the source of authenticating the off-chain assets and then bringing them onto the blockchain?
Yeah, so I mean that part I think is not solved by a blockchain right now, right? There's no robot out there that goes and like knocks on the side of the building for you to say, okay, this thing actually exists, like wherever you're investing in it right now. You got to have, when you're originating assets, you have to have someone to go in and say, okay, if it is real estate, and I keep referencing real estate because it's like a really easy example to go off of, but it's the same thing for everything. If you look at the title, you can go verify that with the city or whatever it's in. You can say, okay, this building exists, this person owns it, and then it's the same process for like financial records audits and things like that. So that piece is still, it's a manual process, but I guess the benefit still that this technology can play into that is that you can again store that information on chain, so it front loads that work. That way it doesn't have to happen again and again and again every time. Like you buy this thing and you want to sell it, people can reference back to the same information that you gathered at the time like the asset was originated, and then ideally you have a system in place where you can track it since then, and that information is all in one place for them to verify themselves, and then it snowballs from there.
Yeah, definitely. So it's still a work in progress, in your opinion. I mean, I kind of piggybacking off your answer, what do you feel needs to happen for this like process to accelerate or have that solution come to us faster?
Like that origination solution, or just the whole process of tokenization?
Yeah, just having like a good process for the authenticating, and just like, I guess, what would you say is the most efficient way in your mind for that to happen?
I think it more comes down to like, it's a relatively new concept, and the problem with that is that everyone wants to come up with their own unique solution for it, and if everyone's doing their own unique solution, no one's adopting a standard, and then you have to go verify that that own unique solution like works, and then it's not really a solution, right? It's just like, it just probably makes it more complicated in some ways. So I think it's like people coming together and adopting a standard, which may or may not be something that you just have to sit back and wait for it to happen over time, because economically people will just do the thing that's cheapest and most efficient eventually. I mean, perhaps that's the next like $1 billion company, is someone that can figure out how to get everybody to work together on this, but I don't really see that happening super quickly.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first. It could be the next billion-dollar idea for anyone listening. Please
Yeah, I
help
want
us.
royalties if you figure that out.
Right. Please help us with a solution. No, that's good. Let's see. And one more question that I have here for you is digital security or tokenization the future of onboarding real world assets to the blockchain, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, again, so back to like the first question, I think tokenization is by definition the only way to put it on there, right? If you're just representing it as a token, that's how things get represented on chain. So yeah, and then digital securities, I guess it really comes down to, in my opinion, it's like if you start splitting an asset up into fractionalized shares of it or something, then that's a security. But the entire asset itself, not necessarily. But it depends on like the level of functionality, right? What you want to do. Do you want to make it investable, or do you just want to like, for some reason, have a record of that thing on chain? So I'll go with yes, but it really depends on what you want to do.
Okay. And then is there anything like fun you want to share that's going on currently at TaroFi, or anything that you guys are working on that you would like our audience to know about?
Yeah, so I think if you're a nerd, you might think it's really fun and cool, but maybe not otherwise. But I think what's unique about one of the things we're focusing on is making emerging markets investing in like cross-border investing more of a thing. So if you look on our website, the first token that's available for purchase, it's actually multifamily property in Cambodia, of all places, which is pretty random when we bring that up with people. But if you go and do research about the country and the economy and how fast it's been growing, it's like, well, that's a really interesting opportunity that I don't know if there's another solution out there that allows someone to click a button and invest in something like that. So I think that's a unique part, I think, about what we're focusing on. That is, I think, I don't want to like talk down about anyone else, but like is lost on a lot of the community. In that there's a lot of people that want to go out and tokenize like a massive private equity fund that will still mandate like the same restrictions on people that can invest in it anyways. So it kind of limits that accessibility factor. But when you're looking at something like these emerging market opportunities, it really does open up the door, and it showcases like a perfect use case for something like this.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, I definitely would have not thought about Cambodia as the first country that you guys are working with the tech, but that's kind of forward thinking, and it's really nice that you're also helping people in different countries that may not be as popular in this tech. So big ups to you guys, and that's super exciting. Where can our audience find you? Where can we know more about you? What's your socials? Feel free to kind of just plug yourself in here at the end, Dominic.
Yeah, so Twitter, just at Taro Finance Inc., tarofi.io, and you can access our web app at invest.tarofi.io. We're coming out with some exciting news in the next month or so stay updated.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and I can't wait to see what else TaroFi invests in, comes out with, what other countries you guys are going to put yourself in. So thank you again for your time, Dominic, and I wish you guys nothing but the best.
All right. Thanks, Nikki. Great talking to you. Thanks, Andrew.
You too. With this, we come to the end of the episode. Thank you, Dominic, for joining us and sharing your insightful thoughts. To our audience, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what we are discussing about the RWA and DeFi world, please don't forget to subscribe to Link to the Chain and share it with others. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow our Instagram and Twitter at Link to the Chain. Looking forward to sharing with you guys the next episode. Stay tuned.